"Hand over all company property," HR demanded after firing me. I just smiled and gave them the keys to the building. An hour later, the CEO called screaming, "Why is there an eviction notice taped to my office door?" The firing, the conference room was too quiet. I sat alone at the glass table, a half-finished coffee cooling in my hands. Across from me sat Dana from HR, someone I'd trained 3 years ago when she couldn't figure out how to unjam the printer. Now she wore a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We appreciate everything you've done," she said, sliding a folder toward me. "But your position has been re-evaluated." I blinked. "Re-evaluated?" She folded her hands. "Effective immediately. Your employment with Collingsworth Tech is terminated. You'll receive a standard severance package contingent on." My ears buzzed. 10 years. 10 years I gave this place, building their server rooms from scratch, writing the code base that now ran their logistics, personally managing the switchover during their $1 million rebrand. They called me the IT magician, but today I was just another line item on someone's cost-cutting spreadsheet. Dana continued. "We'll need your badge, your laptop, your company phone," and she looked at a checklist. "Any other company property in your possession?" I nodded slowly. My voice didn't shake. "Anything else?" "Yes," she said, like she was reading off a grocery list. "And the keys to the building." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" She glanced up. "Yes, all property. Please hand over the keys today." I smiled, not out of humor, but out of something deeper. The kind of smile that comes right before the storm. I stood, placed my badge on the table, and then reached into my coat pocket and placed 3 master keys beside it, all gleaming. Dana blinked. "Wait, why do you have?" But I was already walking to the door. "You'll find out soon." Outside, I paused for just a second, looked up at the building I'd helped wire, structure, and lease 10 years ago. They wanted everything. They were about to get more than they bargained for. They fired me like I was disposable. But they forgot something. I wasn't just an employee. I was their landlord. Chapter 2. The Lease Agreement. Most people assumed I was just the IT guy. And for the first few years, I kept to myself. Fixed their systems. Built them infrastructure that could have cost millions, if outsourced. I made the company efficient, scalable, profitable. But I wasn't stupid back when Collingsworth Tech was still in its scrappy startup phase. Before their Series B, before the glossy office renovations, they ran out of cash. Bad quarter, risky hires. CFO walked out. They needed a miracle to survive. That miracle was me. They owed back rent and were about to be evicted. The building owner had enough. One phone call away from locking them out. That's when I made my move. I called the landlord, offered to buy the building outright, quietly. It wasn't much at the time. I liquidated some old crypto, pulled savings, even borrowed from my brother. And just like that, I became their landlord. No one knew. I signed a long-term lease with them under a holding company name, Iron Loop Properties LLC. Sounded like a shell firm, just vague enough not to raise questions. I kept my name out of it. Why? Because I wanted to work. I loved what I did. But I also knew tech companies chew up loyalty and spit it out. So I protected myself. For the last 6 years, they paid me rent. Every desk, every chair, every server room I wired, it sat on property I owned. The floor they fired me on, mine. And the moment Dana asked me to hand over all company property and return my keys, she unknowingly triggered a breach of lease clause. Specifically, if tenant terminates employment of landlord or any representative thereof, without prior negotiation or notice, landlord reserves the right to terminate lease without penalty or refund. That clause, written by my attorney brother, was buried on page 14. Iron Loop Properties didn't waste a second. By the time Dana had finished her HR checklist, a notice of lease termination had already been drafted. By lunchtime, a court-stamped eviction notice was posted on the glass double doors of the executive floor. But the best part? That wasn't even the main blow. The servers were crashing, the phones were down, but they hadn't even realized yet. I also owned the cloud infrastructure they'd built their business on. Chapter 3. System Failure. By the time the CEO stormed into the building an hour later, the eviction notice had already gone viral inside the company Slack. I heard through a friend, one of the few decent folks still there, that he screamed something like, What the hell is Iron Loop Properties and why is it on our lease? But that wasn't even the worst of it, because while they were flailing around trying to make sense of the building situation, their servers started going offline. One by one, email down, client portals, blank billing system frozen. Then came the phones dead. You see, when I helped build the company, I didn't just mean plugging in routers and fixing keyboards. I was the architect behind the entire infrastructure stack, the hosting environment, the GitHub pipelines, the load balancers, and even the VPN access. All of it had my fingerprints on it. But here's the fun part. I didn't shut anything down. That would have been illegal. Instead, I revoked my license agreements. You see, 2 years ago, I started developing proprietary software tools under my own name, tools that I allowed the company to use under a personal license. I'd even emailed them copies of the usage terms. But after they fired me, that license was void, no notice required, and those tools, they weren't just background utilities. They were the backbone of their daily operations. Their CRM, mine, their custom analytics dashboard, mine, their server monitor that alerts it before outages, mine. The moment my license expired, the systems didn't crash. They simply stopped working. No warning, no data loss, just gone. They'd built a tech empire on tools they thought they owned, but I never signed over the rights. And now they were scrambling to rebuild in a panic while trying to figure out if they could even access their data without me. I sat on my balcony that evening, sipping a glass of Merlot, watching the emails roll in. First came Dana, subject, "We need to talk, please call me." Then the CEO, subject, "URGNTSYSTEMDOWN, please respond." Then legal, subject. Immediate cease and desist, we're confused. And finally, one from an outside client, subject, "Your company's platform is offline. Should we cancel the contract?" I didn't respond to any of them because the trap hadn't finished closing yet. The next morning, their biggest investor demanded a call, and when I answered, he said 9 words that made it all worth it. Chapter 4, The Call from the Top. I was still in my robe the next morning when my phone rang. Unknown number, normally I'd ignore it, but something told me to pick up. Hello? There was a pause, then a voice clipped and angry. "Is this Mr. Lane?" The former CTO of Mvex Corporation. I recognized the voice instantly. James Kessler, the lead investor and board chair, the man behind their last $15 million series, B round. "Yes," I replied casually, swirling my coffee. "How can I help you?" He didn't waste time. Why is there an eviction notice on the headquarters? Why is the company offline? Why am I getting calls from clients not the CEO? I let him rant, and when he finally paused to breathe, I calmly said, "Well, James, it seems they forgot the difference between owning talent and renting it." Silence then, in a low growl, he asked, "Did they really fire the guy who held the lease and built the tech without a backup plan?" I didn't answer. He already knew. 10 minutes later, I got a follow-up email forwarded from my old company inbox. It was Kessler's direct message to the CEO. Subject, "Fix this or you're out. I don't care what personal drama you're dealing with. If you tank this investment over ego, you're done. Hire him back. Pay what it takes." Now, they didn't even get the chance. Because that afternoon, I filed the final transfer paperwork. The building lease was now officially reassigned to a new tenant, a startup I'd been quietly incubating for months with a few ex-employees. The locks were changed, and Mvex, they were legally homeless. Their CEO was sending desperate texts trying to act like we could talk it out. Too late, the server licenses still revoked, the office gone, the code base, they had backups, but no one who could read the architecture, and worst of all, their top 3 clients, the ones I had built personal relationships with over years, were now talking to me directly. One had already signed anew with my new venture. Another said, "We've been meaning to find an excuse to jump ship. Thanks for making it easy." What they failed to understand was simple. I wasn't just a guy with a badge and a desk. I was the foundation. And when you try to erase the architect, don't be surprised when the building collapses. Chapter 5, The Press Conference. The CEO, Grant LeWood, always craved the spotlight. He built Mvex's brand around his visionary leadership, always the face in Forbes interviews, the name in press releases. So, when the news broke, it wasn't a whisper, it was a detonation. Mvex evicted from headquarters after firing executive who held lease. Tech Insider, New Startups Collapse Triggers Investor Backlash. The Valley Journal. Suddenly, everyone remembered who really built the back end, who wrote the patents, who hired the core dev team, and who was no longer there. That weekend, a panel I'd been booked on months ago, back when I was still CTO, moved forward without changes. Except now, I was listed as founder of Stratinc, my new startup. Grant showed up at the event uninvited. He cornered me near the green room, looking more like a sweating salesman than a tech mogul. "You're destroying the company," he hissed. "You did that the day you signed my termination papers," I replied. He tried to threaten legal action, said I'd breached some non-compete, but the crowd forming around us, it wasn't on his side, and I knew why. Just that morning, I'd quietly sent every major VC and tech journalist a single-page PDF, timeline of intellectual property development at MX by the numbers, built 90% of core architecture, held master lease on HQ, negotiated 2 of 3 top client contracts fired without cause, no transition plan. It didn't take much to connect the dots. Later that evening, the CFO resigned, the CMO deleted their LinkedIn, investors issued a public statement distancing themselves from recent leadership decisions, and Grant, he held a live stream press conference on Monday to address rumors. 5 minutes in, a reporter asked, "Is it true the codebase you're using is now legally owned by Stratinc?" Grant froze. I didn't even need to say a word because the cameras caught everything, the twitch, the sweat, the unraveling. By the end of the week, 3 more clients had shifted to my startup. In a few days, everything he built on ego came crashing down under the weight of his own arrogance. And I never raised my voice, never broke a single law, just pulled back what was mine. The difference was, he inherited a title. I built the empire. Chapter 6. Epilogue. The blueprint I kept. 3 months after the press conference meltdown, MVEX quietly filed for bankruptcy. The building, the one I once held the lease for, had a new tenant, Stratinc, my company. Not just because I wanted to win, but because I wanted to build something on my own terms, without arrogance, without betrayal, without walls made of glass and egos. And this time, the blueprint I followed wasn't just technical, it was personal. Reflection, what I took with me, they fired me thinking they were stripping me of power. But power isn't in an ID badge or title. It's in what you build, what you protect, and what you walk away from with your integrity intact. When I handed HR the keys, I gave them what they asked for. Not because I lost, but because I'd already moved on, what they didn't know. The true architecture of MVEX wasn't in the servers or code. It was in the vision they discarded when they discarded me. And when they laughed me out the door, they didn't just lose an employee, they lost the future. The lesson, quiet revenge, loud results. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about fire and fury. It's about silence. It's about letting them dig their own grave while you quietly build a castle next door. It's about being underestimated and using that to your advantage. They taped my name on a wall and said, "Don't let him in." And now their replacements tape my vision board to theirs. They quote me in pitches. They apply for jobs at Stratinc. Because what I built came from more than code. It came from being broken, humiliated, and rebuilt, smarter. Final line, they took the company from me. So I took away everything they thought they owned, including their illusion of control. Was this revenge perfectly justified, or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice, and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe to Walter's story, because here betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning. Every mask breaks and every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp, stay unbroken, stay tuned.